The encounter that sparked it all. It was a breezy afternoon in Los Angeles. The sun glinted off polished windows and glossy luxury cars that lined the private parking areas of the upscale Beverly Star Mall. It was the kind of place where handbags had their own security guards and water cost more than a meal. This wasn't just any shopping center. It was the shopping center for Hollywood's elite. Inside, the air was cool, filled with the faint hum of soft jazz and the clinking of boutique hangers. Staff members stood at attention in every high-end store, ready to assist a celebrity or billionaire with whatever they needed. And it was here that a moment was about to unfold, one that would change multiple lives forever. At the center of the polished floors and golden chandeliers stood a young man, 16 years old, tall, athletic, and wrapped head to toe in designer wear. His name was Braden Cole. He was the heir to Cole Enterprises, a tech company worth over $3 billion. His father, a self-made tycoon, believed in power, prestige, and never showing weakness. And Braden, he was molded from the same cloth, only younger, louder, and more entitled. He strutted through the mall like he owned the place. To be fair, his father actually did own several of the brands inside. Braden loved making that known, often testing how far he could push the store staff, the security guards, and even random shoppers, especially ones he assumed weren't rich or famous. Today, Braden was surrounded by a trio of his equally arrogant friends. They were sipping $20 smoothies and laughing obnoxiously loud, their laughter bouncing through the marble halls. That's when he walked in. No bodyguards, no assistants, just a calm, quiet presence in a worn black blazer, dark jeans, and scuffed boots. He moved slowly, respectfully, as if each step he took was to avoid disturbing the peace around him. At first, nobody noticed. Except Braden. "Whoa, look at that guy!" Braden burst out, nudging one of his friends. Did he just walk in from 1999? His friends turned to look. One snorted. Another pulled out his phone to record. The man, tall and unmistakable, if you knew who to look for, was none other than Keanu Reeves. But Braden, wrapped in his own bubble of shallow influence, had no idea. Keanu had come to the mall for something simple. He wanted to buy a replacement part for a rare vintage watch he owned. Nothing flashy, just sentimental. He wasn't there for attention, nor did he expect any. He'd always preferred to live quietly despite his global fame. But today, the universe had other plans. Braden stepped forward, walking with exaggerated swagger. "Hey, old man," he said loud enough to draw attention from a nearby boutique. "Lose your way to the thrift store." Keanu looked up, startled, not offended, just surprised. He gave the teen a soft nod and smiled. "No, I think I'm in the right place," he said gently. "Just here to browse." "Oh," Braden said, circling him like a hawk. "Browsing, huh? That's what broke people say." The friends burst out laughing, and Keanu, rather than responding with irritation, simply placed his hands in his pockets and began to walk away. But Braden wasn't finished. His pride needed an audience. "Hey, everyone," Braden called out, waving his arms dramatically. "We've got a celebrity impersonator over here." A few heads turned. One or two passersby raised an eyebrow. Keanu froze mid-step, but didn't turn around. There was silence. A few murmurs. And then, a store assistant stepped out from the luxury wash shop, and his eyes widened. "Sir, Mr. Reeves, I didn't expect you today." Suddenly, everything shifted. Braden's face dropped. One of his friends slowly lowered his phone. The staff member rushed over with reverence, extending a hand and bowing slightly. Braden blinked. "Wait, Mr. Reeves. As in, John Wick. The Matrix? That Keanu Reeves?" Keanu turned around and gave a small smile. "Yeah," he said, still calm. "That's me." Braden took a step back, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. His friends looked at one another, uncertain whether to laugh or hide. The staff member continued, "Would you like to come in, sir? We just got in a new vintage collection. I can bring you a private selection room." Braden, floundering now, attempted to recover his ego. "Okay, so what if you're famous? This place still costs real money." Keanu paused, and then, very quietly, he said something that would be remembered by everyone there for years to come. "I know. That's why I'm buying everything." Braden laughed awkwardly. "Wait, what?" Keanu didn't answer. He walked into the store, where the manager greeted him with warm familiarity. And then, before the eyes of the stunned teen and his entourage, Keanu took out a slim black card, a Centurion card, also known as the American Express Black Card. A kind of card you don't apply for. They invite you. The kind reserved for individuals with wealth, discretion, and power. Within minutes, staff were running back and forth, packaging watches, accessories, and limited editions. Keanu quietly signed the receipt, thanked every employee personally, and even tipped the entire team generously. But he wasn't done. He walked out of the store, carrying not a single item himself. The bags were being delivered, but he walked back to Braden, who now looked completely unsure of how to feel. Keanu looked at him, not with anger, not even disappointment, just clarity. "You never know who you're talking to," he said, "or what they've been through. Be kind. It costs nothing." Then he walked away. But that wasn't the end. The entire moment was recorded by another shopper, someone who did recognize Keanu right away. They posted it to TikTok with the caption, "Rich teen mocks a stranger in a mall. Turns out the stranger was Keanu Reeves. What he does next? Legendary." Within hours, it hit 1 million views. By the end of the day, 10 million. News outlets picked it up. Headlines read, "Keanu Reeves teaches rich teen a lesson in class and kindness." When humility meets arrogance, Keanu's silent comeback goes viral. Braden's face was everywhere. And so was Keanu's message. But deeper still, the event stirred something inside Braden. Something confusing. Something uncomfortable. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel powerful. He felt exposed. Ashamed. And the worst part, he felt inspired. The fall from grace. Braden didn't sleep that night. The video was everywhere. He had gone to bed thinking the situation would blow over, that people had short memories, and something else would trend in the morning. But when he opened his phone, his notifications were flooded. Messages from classmates, influencers tagging him in memes, even strangers commenting on his photos with hashtags like #HumbledByKeanu and #BeKindNotBraden. The video had gone viral not just for the shock value, but for the sharp contrast it revealed. A cocky, designer-clad teen mocking a man he didn't recognize, only for that man to be one of the most beloved figures in Hollywood, known for humility, charity, and grace. The internet didn't take kindly to the disrespect. Braden watched the clip over and over again, cringing each time. The worst part wasn't even his words. It was the way Keanu had responded. Calm, dignified, without an ounce of anger or ego. That kind of restraint had made Braden look 10 times worse by comparison. At school, everything changed. The once respected teen who rolled up in luxury sports cars and boasted about yacht parties was now a walking meme. Students passed him in the hall whispering, "Hey, isn't that the guy who got verbally destroyed by Keanu Reeves?" Teachers looked at him differently. Even his so-called friends started to distance themselves. He sat alone at lunch for the first time in years. But the worst hit came when he got home and found his father waiting in the living room. Arms crossed, phone in hand, a look on his face Braden had never seen before. "What the hell were you thinking?" his father said coldly, tossing the phone onto the coffee table. "Do you realize how much damage this is doing to our name? Clients are calling. Partners are calling. I had to do a full PR suite this morning because my son couldn't control his mouth in public." Braden wanted to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He had always been told he was special, the next in line to lead the company, the golden boy. But now, all that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. His father continued, voice like steel. Do you know who Keanu Reeves is? That man has more integrity in his pinky finger than you've shown in your entire life. He's respected in every industry we're trying to break into. If we lose deals because of this, because of you, I won't hesitate to cut you out. That night, Braden sat in his room, phone face down, lights off. For the first time, he didn't feel like a rich kid. He didn't feel powerful. He felt empty. And strangely, he kept replaying Keanu's words in his head. You never know who you're talking to, or what they've been through. Be kind. It costs nothing. It wasn't just a clever line. It was the truth, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. Then something unexpected happened. An email arrived. From a private address. Subject line. We all make mistakes. What you do next is what matters. Signed simply, KR. Braden stared at it for 10 minutes before he opened it. Inside, a short message. I've been in your shoes. Not exactly, but I've made bad choices too. You don't have to be defined by one moment. If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to talk. Meet me tomorrow. No cameras, just conversation. Location, the bench outside Laurel Coffee House, 2 p.m. Keanu. Braden's heart thumped in his chest. He felt exposed, vulnerable. But somewhere deep down, he also felt seen. The next day, he sat in his car outside Laurel Coffee House. He almost didn't get out. What would he even say? How could he look Keanu in the eye after what he did? But eventually, his hand reached for the door handle. His feet carried him to the bench. And there he was, sitting quietly with a paper cup, hair slightly tousled by the wind, dressed in the same understated style as before. Keanu Reeves. He looked up and smiled. Hey, Braden. No anger, no sarcasm, just kindness. Braden sat down, unsure where to start. I didn't know who you were, he said awkwardly. Keanu nodded. That's not what bothered me. Braden looked at him, confused. It was how quick you were to assume someone was beneath you, Keanu continued, taking a sip of coffee. That says a lot more about a person than whether they know a celebrity's face. Braden lowered his gaze. I've never felt that small before. Keanu was quiet for a moment, then replied, sometimes we need to feel small, before we understand how to grow. The words sank in like stones tossed into still water. Keanu didn't lecture. He didn't shame. Instead, he asked Braden about his life, his pressures, his relationship with his father. He listened, nodding with quiet empathy. And Braden, to his own surprise, found himself opening up. He talked about the expectations, the coldness at home, the way wealth had always been dangled in front of him like a leash. He spoke of loneliness, the performance of perfection he had to put on every day, and the fear that, beneath it all, he wasn't really anyone. Keanu didn't interrupt. When Braden finally finished, Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You're still young. You get to choose the kind of man you want to be. Not for your father. Not for the world. For you. Braden blinked back something unfamiliar in his eyes. Tears. Is that what you did? He asked. Keanu gave a soft smile. Eventually, yeah. It took me losing people. Losing myself. But I found my way by helping others. Maybe that's where your journey begins too. They sat there for a while in silence, two people from entirely different worlds, yet somehow on the same bench, bonded by humanity. Before leaving, Keanu stood and handed Braden a folded envelope. This is a list of volunteer centers, shelters, places that could use a hand, not a donation. Just time. If you really want to change, start there. Braden took the envelope, clutching it tighter than he expected. And as Keanu walked away, disappearing into the noise of the city like a whisper, Braden stared at the list, something shifting inside him. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The faces he never saw before. The morning was cold and gray when Braden stood outside the rusted metal doors of Street Alora's community shelter. The sign overhead was faded, its corners flapping slightly in the wind. The parking lot was cracked, a stray grocery cart left abandoned near the curb. This was a far cry from the gleaming marble floors and perfume-scented luxury stores he was used to. Braden stared at the shelter's entrance like it was another world, one he'd never had to see, one he'd never cared to understand. Clutched in his hand was the letter Keanu had given him, still folded, the creases soft from being opened and read over and over again during the last few days. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. No social media, no driver, no fancy watch or branded jacket. Just a hoodie, jeans, and nerves. He stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, not from the heater, but from the sound. Voices, laughter, chatter, the murmur of volunteers and residents blending into an oddly comforting hum. A woman behind a folding table greeted him with a surprised smile. "You must be the new helper Keanu mentioned," she said. He blinked. He told you I was coming. He called. Said you'd be showing up soon. Said we should give you a chance. Braden felt something tug in his chest. She extended a hand. "I'm Nora, volunteer coordinator, social worker, and part-time referee when the kids argue over board games." He chuckled nervously and shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes warm. She handed him a volunteer badge. Braden, first-timer, with a cartoon smiley face drawn on it. "Let's start you with the breakfast shift," she said. "Come on, you'll meet the crew." And just like that, Braden was ushered into the kitchen, handed an apron, and assigned to scrambled egg duty. The first hour was awkward. He kept messing up the portions, forgetting which tray went where, and accidentally spilling orange juice on the counter. But no one yelled. No one mocked him. Instead, a tall man with a grizzled beard and missing fingers clapped him on the back. "Happens to all of us, kid. I once put salt in the coffee pot." Braden laughed. Seriously. Dead serious. Name's Hank. Army vet. Lost these in 07, but still got enough grip to stir eggs. "You're doing fine." Hank showed him how to work the trays more efficiently, how to balance the cups, how to move with purpose but without panic. And as they worked, they talked. Braden learned that Hank had once had a home, a family, a life. But one injury, one bad insurance call, and a string of bad luck had brought him here. Still, Hank didn't complain. He volunteered. He helped others. He had nothing, and yet gave so much. That afternoon, Braden met Linda, a single mother of two who'd escaped an abusive marriage and was trying to find housing. She had bruises under her eyes and stress lines that no teenager should have ever caused, but she smiled whenever her son, Jeremy, walked into the room. Jeremy was only 6. Dirt on his shoes. A missing front tooth. He ran through the shelter like he owned it, handing out handmade drawings to everyone he passed. He stopped in front of Braden and held up a crumpled picture. "It's you," he said proudly. "You're giving eggs to my mom and making her smile." Braden stared at the drawing. Stick figures, yellow scribbles, a big grin drawn on his face. "You're a superhero," Jeremy whispered. Braden swallowed hard. That night, as he left the shelter, he didn't go home. He sat on a park bench, hoodie pulled tight around him, watching people walk by. Families, couples, joggers, a man pushing a cart full of cans. For the first time, he didn't see them. He saw people, and he wondered how many lives he'd walked past, how many stories he'd missed, simply because they didn't wear designer labels or drive luxury cars. Over the next week, Braden returned every day. He cleaned bathrooms. He carried crates. He played cards with residents who hadn't smiled in days. And slowly, word spread through the shelter. The rich kid who once mocked a stranger was showing up every morning at 6 a.m. to clean dishes. They began to talk to him. They shared stories. And he listened. He met an immigrant father who walked 3 miles to deliver food so his daughter could go to school. He met a once famous musician who lost everything to addiction, but still played lullabies on an old guitar for the shelter kids. He met a teenage girl who had been disowned by her parents after coming out, and now braided hair for other girls to earn trust and friendship. Every story peeled another layer off of Braden's old self. Every interaction cracked his armor. And in its place, something new began to grow. Humility, compassion, self-respect. One afternoon, as he handed Jeremy a new coloring book he'd picked up with his own money, Nora called him over. "There's someone here to see you," she said, a knowing twinkle in her eye. Braden turned and saw him, Keanu, leaning casually against the doorway, holding a cup of coffee, dressed the same as always. Simple, quiet, real. Braden walked up, smiling more sincerely than he had in months. "Hey," he said, voice steady. "Didn't expect to see you here." Keanu shrugged. "I wanted to check in. See how your journey was going." Braden gestured around him. "It's life-changing. I've never seen people like this. I never let myself see them before. And now I want to do more." Keanu nodded, then pulled out a worn journal from his coat. He handed it to Braden. "What's this?" Braden asked. "My notes," Keanu said. "Stories, places, ideas. I've kept it for years. Now I think it's your turn to carry it." Braden opened the first page. In faded ink were the words, "The world doesn't need more power. It needs more kindness." He closed the book gently, looked up, and whispered, "Thank you." Keanu smiled. "Don't thank me. Just keep showing up. That's how we change the world." As he walked away once again, this time leaving something behind, Braden didn't feel like a fallen prince or a social pariah anymore. He felt human. And for the first time in his life, that was more than enough. Rebuilding bridges. The silence between Braden and his father had grown into a canyon. Ever since the incident at the mall and the media storm that followed, conversations in the Cole mansion had been reduced to curt nods, awkward eye contact, and the occasional businesslike exchange over dinner. No more jokes. No more father-son banter. It was as if Braden had become a liability, an unsightly crack in the polished surface of the Cole family legacy. But now, things were different. Something had shifted inside Braden, not out of guilt or fear, but from a genuine, bone-deep transformation. The days spent at Street Alora's shelter, the faces he could no longer unsee, the laughter, the tears, the struggle, it had all imprinted something permanent on his soul. He knew that eventually he'd have to return to the marble floors of his home and face the man who had once been his hero, and somehow, over time, had turned into a stranger. That evening, he found his father in the study, an ornate room filled with first-edition books and heavy leather chairs, the scent of expensive cigar smoke lingering in the air. His father, Nathaniel Cole, sat behind a grand mahogany desk, tapping away at a tablet, glass of scotch in hand. He barely looked up when Braden entered. "I need 5 minutes," Braden said, standing tall despite the nerves chewing at his insides. Nathaniel glanced at him. "Is this about the car you wrecked, or the PR nightmare you caused?" Braden didn't flinch. "Neither. This is about me. And maybe you too." The older man arched an eyebrow, but said nothing. Braden stepped forward. "I've been volunteering. Every day. At a shelter." Nathaniel finally set the tablet down, folding his arms with visible skepticism. "A shelter? Yeah. I serve food. I clean floors. I sit with people who've been through things we'll never understand." He paused, searching for the right words. "It's changed me." Nathaniel leaned back, the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. "Is this your redemption tour, son?" "No," Braden replied steady. "This is me finally figuring out who I am when no one's watching. And you know what? I like that version better." The smirk vanished. Braden continued. I know I humiliated you, and I'm sorry. But honestly, I think that moment, me getting humbled, was the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it woke me up. There was silence, thick and unmoving. Then Nathaniel stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the city skyline. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice quieter than Braden had ever heard. You think I had a choice, building this empire? You think I got to be soft? I had to claw my way up from nothing, boy. I built this so you wouldn't have to suffer like I did. Braden stepped forward, his voice gentler now. But maybe that's the problem. You built walls so high to protect me, I couldn't see what was real. Nathaniel turned, and for the first time in years, there was something raw in his expression. Vulnerability. Pain. I don't know how to be anything else, he admitted. Braden nodded. Maybe we both can learn. Together. The moment hung in the air like a fragile truce. Later that night, Nathaniel placed a hand on Braden's shoulder as he passed. Just a simple gesture, but in a house where warmth had once felt like currency, it meant everything. The next morning, Braden stood at a podium in front of his school auditorium. His principal had invited him to speak after hearing about his volunteer work. Some teachers were skeptical. Many students still whispered behind his back. But Braden didn't care anymore. He wasn't there for approval. He was there to tell the truth. Most of you know me from that viral video, he began. The one where I made a fool of myself, where I mocked someone I thought was less than me. What you didn't see was what happened afterward. The lessons I learned. The people who changed me. He told them about Hank, the Army vet, about Linda and her son Jeremy, about Keanu, though he never used his full name, out of respect. He spoke not with polished charm, but raw sincerity. No script. No filter. I used to think money was the only thing that made you valuable. Now I know it's kindness. It's empathy. It's showing up for people even when there's nothing in it for you. The auditorium was silent. And then, applause. Not forced. Not polite. Genuine. Even the kids who used to idolize him for his wealth were clapping, not because he had changed clothes, but because he had changed hearts. A week later, Braden walked into Street Alora's with a binder tucked under his arm. He had an idea, a real one, a project he'd worked on for days. He met with Nora in the back office and placed the binder on her desk. "What's this?" she asked, curious. "It's called the Bridge Project," he said. "A way to connect high school students with shelters like this one. Volunteering, mentorship, donation drives, whatever you need. I want to build something that lasts." Nora opened the binder and skimmed through the pages. She looked up, eyes shining. "This could change lives." Braden nodded. "It already has. Mine." That night, Braden received a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the Bridge Project. I'm proud of you. And I'm here if you need anything. K." Braden smiled. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew that Keanu wasn't watching from afar like a judge, but standing beside him, quietly, faithfully, like a mentor who understood that real change comes from within. And the boy who once stood in a shopping mall laughing at strangers. He was gone. In his place stood a young man, still learning, still growing, but finally walking with purpose. The ripple effect. It began with one binder, then a call, then a meeting in a small, echoey school gymnasium with squeaky chairs and flickering lights. But within weeks, the Bridge Project was no longer just a concept hidden in a binder. It had become a movement. Braden watched in awe as school after school adopted the idea. Students wearing bright blue volunteer shirts began showing up at shelters, food pantries, and community centers across Los Angeles. Principals emailed Nora directly, asking how they could be a part of it. Some offered school credits, others turned it into monthly field trips. What made it different wasn't just the charity, it was the connection. The raw, face-to-face moments between kids who had everything and people who had nothing but their stories. Students who once bragged about vacations in Paris now sat cross-legged on shelter floors listening to veterans talk about the war. Girls who'd once mocked others for wearing thrift store clothes were now organizing clothing drives. Entire communities were bending, shifting, transforming. The Bridge Project even earned a short segment on the local news. The headline read, "From viral shame to community change, teen's redemption story inspires a city." And when asked who had inspired him, Braden simply said, "A stranger who reminded me how powerful kindness can be." But just as momentum soared, tragedy struck. One rainy morning, Braden arrived at Street Aloris to find the staff and residents huddled outside beneath tarps and umbrellas. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, and part of the roof had collapsed under the pressure of a faulty electrical fire. No one was hurt, thank God, but the shelter was no longer livable. Braden's chest tightened. It wasn't just a building. It was a lifeline. For Hank, for Linda, for Jeremy and a dozen others. And now it was gone. The city promised to help, but the process would take weeks, maybe months. Red tape, permits, inspections. Braden stood in the parking lot, soaked to the skin, watching as the heart of their community was roped off with caution tape. Nora, eyes red from exhaustion, gave him a weak smile. "We'll figure it out." Braden shook his head. "No, we're not waiting. We're rebuilding." The following days were a whirlwind. Braden tapped into every contact he had. His school's parent board, tech startup circles, even old classmates who once laughed at the shelter idea, but now stood by him, willing to help. He launched a fundraiser with a video that went viral almost overnight. In it, Braden stood outside the charred remains of the shelter and spoke from the heart. "This place gave me a second chance. Now I want to give it one too." He didn't try to manipulate viewers. He didn't cry on cue. He just spoke honestly about Hank's courage, Linda's strength, Jeremy's smile, and the quiet dignity of people who never asked for pity, only a fair shot at hope. The donations poured in, small amounts at first, $5, $10, $50 from retired teachers, factory workers, college students. Then came the bigger ones. Local businesses pitched in. A celebrity chef offered to cater weekly meals. A construction company offered materials at cost. And then, a $100,000 anonymous donation came in with a message. "Kindness is contagious. Proud of you, kid. KR." Braden smiled when he read the initials. Keanu hadn't forgotten. By week's end, the project had raised over $500,000. But money wasn't the only victory. Braden saw high school football teams painting new walls together. He saw rival student groups organizing fundraisers. He saw his own father, Nathaniel Cole, in a hoodie and jeans, lifting drywall alongside shelter volunteers. That sight alone nearly broke Braden's composure. Later that day, as they sat on overturned paint buckets sipping lukewarm coffee, Nathaniel turned to him and said something he never expected. "I've built companies. I've built towers. But this, watching you build something for others, I've never been prouder." Braden didn't respond. He didn't need to. His eyes shimmered with tears and gratitude. 3 weeks later, the shelter reopened. Fresh paint, clean floors, new beds, a computer lab, a learning center for kids like Jeremy. A quiet room for therapy sessions. It wasn't fancy, but it was home again. At the grand reopening, Braden stood on stage next to Nora and a smiling Hank, who now wore a volunteer badge with supervisor printed proudly on it. Linda and Jeremy stood in the front row, holding hands. Braden took the mic and looked out at the crowd. Students, donors, families, strangers who had come together because of one spark. "I used to think one moment could ruin your life," he began. "Now I know one moment can also change it." He told them that change wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, listening, and doing something when it mattered. Then, from the back of the crowd, slow clapping began. Keanu was there, quiet as always, leaning against a pillar, sunglasses tucked into the collar of his coat. He didn't want the spotlight. He never had. But the smile on his face said it all. After the speech, he approached Braden and handed him a small box. Inside was a silver compass. "Thought you could use this," Keanu said, "to remind you that you'll never get lost if you keep following what's right." Braden nodded, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. "You already did," Keanu said, motioning toward the shelter behind them. "This is your thank you. Just keep building." That evening, as the shelter lights flickered on for the first time since the fire, Braden stood outside, watching people walk through the doors with smiles, laughter, and dignity. The boy who once scoffed at a stranger in a mall had built a legacy not of wealth, but of worth. And he knew, in his heart, this was only the beginning. The legacy of one moment. 5 years later, the world had changed, and so had Braden Cole. The Bridge Project had gone national. What began as a teenager's journey toward redemption had become a full-scale nonprofit with branches in over 20 cities across the country. Thousands of students had passed through its programs, volunteering, mentoring, serving, bridging worlds that were never meant to be so far apart. Braden, now 21, stood in his modest office overlooking a community center in downtown San Diego. The boy who once wore designer clothes to impress strangers now wore simple jeans, a faded hoodie, and calloused hands from helping lay floors in shelters just like street Aloras. The office walls weren't lined with degrees or awards, though there were plenty of those. Instead, there were photographs, dozens of them, faces of the people who had shaped his life. Hank with his arm around a group of young volunteers. Linda receiving the keys to her new apartment. Jeremy holding a graduation certificate from a free tutoring program Braden had launched in his name. Every picture was a story. Every story was a reminder. But success hadn't come without resistance. As the Bridge Project grew, so did criticism. Some called it performative. Others questioned how much real impact it had. And now, a sudden scandal had emerged in the media. One of the newer branch managers had been caught misappropriating funds. The news spread fast. Headlines read, "Bridge Project under scrutiny. Is the mission in jeopardy? Can a teen's redemption story survive a corporate firestorm?" Braden sat at his desk, the weight of a million eyes on his shoulders again, just like that first viral moment so many years ago. Only now, the stakes were higher. It wasn't just about his reputation. It was about the people, the shelters, the trust. He stared out the window, lost in thought, and then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up. "Hey," said the voice on the other end. Deep, familiar. Braden almost smiled. "It's been a while." "Thought you could use a reminder," Keanu Reeves said. "You didn't build this on perfection. You built it on purpose." Braden let out a breath. "They're saying it's all fake, that it's just branding, a show." Keanu's voice was calm, steady. "You can't control what they say. You can only keep showing up." Braden paused. "I want to fix it, but I don't know where to start." "Start where you always did," Keanu replied, "with people." The call ended with no fanfare, no motivational monologue, just truth. The next morning, Braden stood outside the Bridge Project headquarters and held a press conference, not with PR agents or crafted statements, but alone, in front of the media and the world. He didn't deny the mistake. He took full responsibility. He publicly apologized to donors, to shelters, to the students who believed in the mission. Then he announced a full audit, restructuring of oversight, and most importantly, a new community-led board composed of those the project served: homeless advocates, shelter leaders, youth voices. "I will not let one person's mistake undo the trust we've spent years building," Braden said. "The Bridge Project was never just mine. It belongs to everyone who believes in compassion, in second chances, and in standing back up when we fall." The media didn't applaud, but the people did. And slowly, the tide turned. Not because Braden fought back with anger, but because he led with the same grace that had once been shown to him. Months passed. The project recovered, stronger and more transparent than ever. Braden stepped into a new role, no longer the face, but a mentor. He trained the next generation of student leaders, watched kids he once guided now building their own community initiatives. One afternoon, he returned to Street Alora's shelter, now fully renovated, thriving and bustling with activity. Hank had retired but still dropped in for coffee and jokes. Linda had become a counselor, helping other women escape domestic abuse. Jeremy, now 11, was taller, quieter, but still kept his drawings in a shoebox. Braden sat on the same old bench where he had once met Keanu for the first time, looking at the sun dipping below the rooftops. And then, familiar footsteps. Keanu approached, slightly older, hair streaked with more gray, but the same calming energy. They sat side by side without words for a while. Finally, Keanu asked, "How's the compass?" Braden smiled, pulling it from his pocket. "Still here, still pointing me in the right direction." Keanu looked at him. "You've come a long way." Braden shook his head. "I've still got a long way to go." "That's the beauty of it," Keanu replied. "It never really ends." They watched the kids playing in the courtyard, volunteers moving chairs, setting up an art table, the community humming with life. And in that quiet moment, Braden realized something. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a path. And every act of kindness, every difficult conversation, every moment of discomfort faced with courage, those were the bricks that built it. Years from now, people may forget the mall incident. They may forget the viral video, the scandal, even the name Braden Cole. But they won't forget the shelters. They won't forget the food on their table, the warm beds, the unexpected hug on a cold day. They won't forget that someone showed up when no one else did. All because one stranger, quiet, kind, unshakable, chose to buy everything in the store not to prove a point, but to make a statement. Kindness is never wasted, and sometimes it changes everything.